What should you do if you encounter a potentially poisoned pawn?
Your primary assumption should be that it contains pathogens such as Salmonella and Campylobacter.
There are three common situations when a chess pawn is considered poisoned, which means that you should not capture such pawns, and at the same time you can bait your opponent into capturing them and losing the game afterwards. For example, let's take a look at the current position. Black has just played queen b6, attacking your pawn on b2. What would you play if you were white here? Just think about this for a couple seconds. The most played move by white here is pawn to b3. Quite many also played bishop c3, guarding the pawn by the bishop. However, the correct move is the move knight to c3, actually letting black capture this pawn on b2. And it's interesting that I can tell you, as a grandmaster, whenever I see a threat like that, my first impulse is always to give up that pawn, because I know that sometimes it is an outright losing mistake for my opponent, and even if it's not, usually I'll have a strong compensation and a strong attack after that, which is gonna be easier for me to play than for my opponent to defend. Now, after knight c3, what if your opponent literally grabs the pawn? Well, capturing a poisoned pawn may lead to an attack of diarrhea for your opponent, of course, if you find the correct refutation. Now, what is the problem with those moves such as queen takes b2? Well, your opponent's queen, or any piece, gets deep into your position, and it becomes surrounded by various pieces of yours that control a whole lot of squares all around. So we're like totally outnumbering the queen, which means that the queen is in big danger and can possibly be captured. Therefore, white should be on the lookout for ways to attack and potentially capture the queen. And white can go rook b1, attacking the queen. The only square for the queen to go to would be queen to a3. After this, white can keep chasing by going knight b5, hitting the queen once again. And now, what can they do? Like, not much really. If, let's say, they capture this pawn, there are different ways to go about this. You could play knight c7, forking their king and rook, or you can keep chasing the queen, and on the next move, the job is actually done. Now the queen can't move anywhere, and you win the game. How about black trying to retreat to a4 instead of being greedy and capturing the other pawn of yours? Well, there is also a beautiful follow-up. Knight takes d6, sacrifices the knight temporarily, followed by bishop b5 with this double attack, and you won their queen anyways. Now, it is not a coincidence that there was this tactic here, because again, you greatly outnumber black, you have plenty of pieces attacking a single queen, and it makes sense that you could ultimately capture it. The most iconic example of that occurred in the World Championship match between Spassky playing white against Fischer playing black. At this moment, the position is just absolutely equal, it's a dead draw. However, Fischer shocked everybody by playing bishop takes h2, because even beginners realize that white can play g3, lock the bishop right there in the corner, and after this, white's plan is very simple to just approach it with a king and capture it. Now, it's really unclear what exactly did Fischer miscalculated here. He played h5 and after king e2, h4. Again, my little guess here is that it might be that he considered that white should capture the pawn and then the bishop will be free to go back. Sometimes while calculating, we make this assumption that if there is an opportunity to capture something, then you just do that. However, invitation is not an obligation. And Spassky just played king f3, and after this it turned out that, hey, the bishop is actually lost. And interestingly enough, we've got a photo of Bobby Fischer playing the move bishop takes h2, which led him to a loss of this game. And also we have a photo of Fischer after he realized that the bishop was trapped, and here's how it looks like when you blunder the piece and you don't even want to look at the position anymore. Strangely, something similar happened in another World Championship match, this time between Nepomniachtchi playing white against Carlsen playing black. And in this position, Nepomniachtchi realized that he can grab this pawn on b7. By the way, you can notice that those pawns which stand on this b file and g file are very often poisoned pawns. Like, I'm not exactly sure how to explain that, but very often it is the case, so you have to be careful while capturing those pawns. In this particular position, however, it's okay because white gains a tempo. Here's attacking the rook. Therefore, Carlsen played rook a4, countering this pawn. And here, Nepomniachtchi played that real blunder, pawn c5. And at this point, everybody was quite surprised, including Carlsen, who is shocked. He can't believe that a world champion contender could blunder a piece like that. Because again, it's a classical scenario. When your opponent's piece gets deep into your position, it's very easy to trap it there, to surround it and capture it. And that is exactly what happens here. After c6, this pawn is defended, the bishop has no way out, and black is just about to go ahead and capture it. Nepomniachtchi played a couple more moves, f3 countering the knight, then rook e4 offering this trade. However, that doesn't really change anything. Rook a7 attacked the bishop, and on the next move it was attacked again, and now it is really over, and within a few next moves white resigned. How would you play in this position for white? Well, the rook is attacked, that's pretty obvious, therefore white needs to do something about that. In the actual game, white lightheartedly grabbed the other pawn on c7, and then realized that not only a bishop can be captured, it could happen to any piece, and after queen b6, all of a sudden, this rook was trapped, and black wins the game. Alright, here's one more example. It is white to move. How would you play here? In other words, should I capture this pawn or not? At first, it looks like the rook stands on an open file and will be able to easily get back. However, let's not forget that those pawns on the g file and b file somehow are often enchanted. Like, so you should think twice before capturing them. Because if the rook captures the pawn, black can play bishop g6, lock the door, and now the rook is totally trapped. On the next move, after whatever white does, it goes king f8, and the rook is still trapped, black wins the game. The second common situation when a pawn becomes poisoned is a waste of time. For example, let's have a look at a very popular, surprisingly, early queen attack, also known as the wayward queen attack. White attacks this pawn and possibly tries to put together that scholar's checkmate. Now, in most cases, black goes knight c6, just guarding that pawn on e5. However, there is also another strategy which might be even more effective. You may let your opponent capture the pawn, trying to gain time and gain advantage in activity, in your development. You can go knight f6, and here's the deal. In order to capture this pawn on e5, notice that white has to spend one move to attack the pawn, the second move to capture it, and most probably at least one more move to retreat the piece from here, because here it's really vulnerable, into black's territory. Those three extra moves give you huge lead in development, and you can put together a quick attack that often easily compensates that little loss of just one little pawn. For example, here white plays bishop c4, as they usually do in scholar's checkmate, Italian game, black castles, d3, white tries to solidify, but now black goes rook e8, opposing the rook to the queen, and it already becomes quite unpleasant. Because here the threat is bishop b4, which would be a check to the king, and then a discover attack off the queen. In the game, white tried to move the queen back. Again, they have to keep losing time doing so, and then black decided to break open the center with pawn d5, hitting the bishop and the pawn, and now white is already in trouble. White took the pawn right here, and let this be a puzzle of the day. It is black to play and win. Please think about this, and if you can find the winning move, please write it down in comments below. There is also a great opening variation that makes use of this strategy. In the bishop's opening, one of my favorite openings, black goes knight f6 hitting this pawn, but you let him capture it, and after they do so, you then still ignore material and you just play knight c3, attacking their knight once again. After this trade, black is a pawn up indeed, because they captured your pawn on e4. However, you have this huge lead in development, making it extremely hard for black to defend. Now you've got 1, 2, and even 3 pieces which are easily ready to be brought into your attack. The queen is also active, and therefore it's really hard for black to defend this position. They'll usually try to guard this pawn by going d6 or knight c6, and in both cases they lose the game. After d6, you even have a choice of how you may wish to win this game. You may go knight g5, similar to the fried liver attack, and that wins the game, or knight takes e5, another spectacular way of pursuing the same goal, attacking this pawn on f7, and as the knight is captured, you can then sack the bishop as well. You keep adding brilliant moves to your collection, distracting the king from defense, and after the king takes it, we then have queen takes d8, grabbing the queen, and here you attack this bishop, the pawn, the king is exposed, and you got a totally winning position. What I love about this strategy is that it adds one more attacking pattern to your toolbox, into your chess arsenal. Because otherwise, whenever you see that your opponent attacks your pawn, we just automatically defend it, and we assume that that is the only way to go about this. However, there is this second strategy where you let your opponent capture a pawn, waste a lot of time, and you use that time to put together a strong attack. Moreover, even Magnus Carlsen once fell victim to this strategy. Magnus is playing black here against Mamedyarov, who's playing white. And it was white to play, and Mamedyarov did just that. Instead of guarding the pawn on c4, which he could certainly easily do, he played bishop d2, letting black capture it, and after this he played rook c1. Therefore, black had to spend a number of moves once again just to grab a pawn. They had to bring the queen out, and reroute it right here to c4, and now they have to spend extra time to get the queen out of danger. because now white threatens to play some sort of, no, not like this, knight to d5 with a discard attack of the queen, and then maybe the knight can jump forward to c7 and capture the rook in the corner, something like this. In order to stop that, Magnus played knight to a6, taking control of this square, but Mamedyarov nevertheless played knight d5, attacking the queen. This knight on d5 is guarded, therefore black can't capture it, they have to move the queen away. And here Magnus got a little greedy and grabbed the other pawn on a2, and white kept playing rook a1. White just keeps gaining more and more temples, attacking this queen. And after queen c4, rook a4 is one more attack. And finally, after queen c5, it turned out that white has now a winning little combination. He traded on f6, check, and after this trade, there is rook takes a6, and that's the move that wins the game, because here, due to this pin, if black captures, which he did, bishop takes a8, and white won a piece, that knight that used to be on a6. Now white is up bishop, and for a super grandmaster, that's enough to win the game, and Mamedyarov won later. There is also the third and last common situation when a pawn becomes poisoned. For example, in the Vienna Gambit, as white goes pawn f4 and attacks this pawn on e5, initially it feels for black like the easiest solution would be just to take the white pawn on f4. However, that is a poisoned pawn. Now, why so? In this position, after pawn takes f4, it feels like there's nothing wrong with black. Black's pieces are not trapped, they're not falling behind in development or anything like that, so what's wrong with that move? Well, that is the third situation. It is when you activate your opponent's position, when you give your opponent some additional space, additional file, additional square, and that just helps your opponent to roll out his attack. In this case, once the pawn is not on e5 any longer, white can push his own pawn there and seize space, attacking this knight, pushing it backwards. We do control all these squares where the knight could possibly go to, therefore we literally push him back to the original square, and now black is in the perfect setup to acknowledge their mistake and to try again in the next game potentially. But anyways, white plays knight f3 here, and after d6, black is trying to get rid of this annoying pawn. White also used the second strategy that we talked about before. White allows black to capture pawns, but instead he gains time. He gains advantage in activity and he wants to attack. Black still captured one more pawn, and now white castled. Another brilliant move. This time it's a poisoned horse. Of course, in many countries people don't eat horse meat at all, but I heard that in Kazakhstan and Mexico, some others they do. So black captured, and now that fails to bishop takes f7. It's a similar tactical pattern to what we've seen before, and again it makes sense. White's development advantage is so huge. We've got this bishop into play, we've got this bishop ready to attack, we've got a queen and this open file, the knight. It makes sense that there is a way for white to turn this into a winning attack, and he does that by bishop takes followed by queen takes d8, winning the queen and having all these massive attack against the black king. Let me also address real quick one question, because yesterday I received an email from somebody who asked me, like, basically, am I too dumb for playing chess because I've been playing for years, but I'm still not having any real progress? And I receive similar questions quite regularly, like when people got stuck in chess and can't improve. And, like, hear me out. It's much easier than it seems. Like, let's not overcomplicate matters. If you just start making fewer blunders, that is plus 300 rating points straight away, like this. And it's relatively easy to achieve that. So people just are misguided. They're not lacking IQ, they're lacking guidance to do the right thing. Because if you just solve tactical puzzles, watch random videos, and play these games, like, it's all nice, and I do that as well, but it's not really the most efficient thing that brings you forward in chess. And if you want my help in really leveling up your chess level, I've got a special course called Level Up Your Chess, where I've included everything that you need to do exactly that. And if you're curious, you can get it by clicking the link somewhere on the screen or down below in the description. Either way, have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.